Alright, so this video clearly shows how as I walk through the device, the lights turn on, and as I walk out of the room, the lights turn off. This is just a demonstration of the device I'm creating, and the lights are off.
Alright, so now to explain the circuitry behind this project. So at the heart of it, we have an ESP32. This has, the reason I use this microcontroller is it's reasonably powerful, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is that it has access to Wi-Fi, and this Wi-Fi allowed me to connect to the APIs of the Philips Hue lights to control the lights essentially. And the wiring just simply consists of the ESP32 being connected to two HCSE SR04 ultrasonic sensors. This breadboard just manages the power, and otherwise the cables are directly connected to each of the sensors inputs. And yeah, the wiring is pretty simple. We'll go over the logic and software next.
Alright, so how does all of this work? Well, let's get straight into it. Now, I'm assuming you guys all know how ultrasonic sensors work, but if you don't, it's fine. So the way it works is by sending a beam, as shown by this red line here, and then it bouncing back off and getting sent back to the ultrasonic sensor. The ultrasonic sensor first starts basically a timer when it sends the beam, and then stops the timer when it receives the signal back. Depending on the time that's elapsed, it can estimate the distance that the beam shot off to. So in this case, how far away the beam got shot to. And in this case, that's the width of the hallway. So we'll call that W centimeters as shown here. Now, when someone walks past this beam, the beam gets interrupted and it gets bounced back very quickly. Because of this, the beam detects a very small amount of distance. So let's say W was 50, so let's say this was 50 centimeters, right? When this happens, it becomes 20 centimeters. Let's just say that as a given example. When this object passes by, it only detects there's a 20 centimeter distance. So with that, we can determine whether something is interrupting the beam or not, whether someone is walking past it or not. Now, when it gets interrupted, because of that, we can assume someone's walked past it. However, we do not know which direction. He could have been going this direction, or he could have going out. And we don't want to turn on and off the lights on a mere guess, right? So we have two ultrasonic sensors. So if this beam gets interrupted first, so let's say this beam gets interrupted first, and then later this beam gets interrupted, well, then we know that this person was exiting because he was moving in this direction. And when he's exiting, we know to turn the lights off. Turn the lights on because he's entering the room, not exiting. I don't know why I said exiting. He's entering the room because he turned the lights on. However, if this beam is cut off first, and then later, after maybe half a second or so, this beam is cut off, then we know he's exiting the room. Then we know he's leaving the room. And then we know to turn off the lights because he's exiting. So using this system, we can determine whether a given person is entering or exiting the room, and whether to switch on and off the lights, determined on how the ultrasonic sensors dis- ha- determined on the ultrasonic sensors readings. And yeah, that's about it. Let's go over the code of how this works next. Well, first of all, the way we're going to turn on and off the lights are through an API with the Philips Hue, and this is locally hosted on my case on the Hue bridge, and I've given an API key which I've hidden for obvious reasons. And yeah, so I can access this locally and send web requests telling it to turn on and off certain lights. Now let's go straight to the setup part of the code. Now first of all, we just connect to the Wi-Fi, give out some basic pin mode config for our ultrasonic sensors, and over here the notable part is we turn off all of the lights. We do this by calling this function called color update, and we turn off the light number 2. To turn it off, we do
false, we turn off light number 3 and light number 4. The way it works is I have 3 lights in my room, and for some reason, by the API, they're numbered 2, 3, and 4 instead of 1, 2, and 3, so I each turn them off individually. Next up, as we move on, I'm just going to quickly jump over to the color update code, the thing I just mentioned. Now, the way this works is it sends a put request to the Hue bridge, telling it to turn on and off the light, on or off the light. I'm going to quickly jump up. It's worth mentioning all this function does is it's a function that works with the ultrasonic sensor. So I can actually convert this to a readable distance in centimeters, and this is just some boilerplate code that can use the pins to get a readable some readable sensor data. Sorry. All right, so now for the actual sort of logic of our code. So first of all, we have if get distance of the first ultrasonic sensor is less than a threshold value. This threshold value is used to determine whether someone is crossing the ultrasonic sensor. So if the distance it gets is less than that value, we know the sensor has been sort of cut short. The beam has been cut short and something is passing through it because the hallway is around 60 centimeters and for it to, 50 centimeters, and for it to detect less than 35 means something must be going through. Now, if this does happen, then you want to just save the current time and do some other logic that basically tells the program that someone crossed this sensor at this time, and it just sort of saves that so that if the other sensor over here, if the other sensor is crossed within 1 second of this sensor being crossed, then you know someone has walked into the room. And then with that, you can turn on the lights. So color update, light number 2, light number 3, light number 4 to be on. If it goes the opposite way, so first the sensor the sensor in the room is first detected to be closing, and then later, maybe within a span of 0.5 seconds, the other sensor is also determined that someone's it's been interrupted, then you know someone's walking out of the room and you should turn off the lights. And we do that right here. So color update 2 false, color update 3 false, color update 4 false, and so on. And yeah, that's about it. And that's all for the code. I hope to see you next time with my next project.